welcome to Hector Ask, and this week we're doing Action Réfugiés Montréal, and we're gonna go upstairs and we're gonna see about what's refugees. Thank you. I would like to know what's a refugee.
So a refugee is someone who has had to leave their country, so where they were born, because they are scared of being persecuted. So that means they were forced to leave their country because something really bad happened. And so they find their way to another country, and that would be considered a refugee. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah?
And if they didn't leave their country, would it still be a refugee or would it not be a refugee?
That's a really good question. So actually, it wouldn't be considered a convention refugee. So to be considered a refugee, you have to actually be outside of your country of origin. So say I was from Canada, I can't be considered a refugee while I'm in Canada. I would have to be forced out of Canada, and then I can apply to be a refugee.
Oh, okay. And where do refugees live before they go to Canada or another place?
That's a good question as well. So refugees can come from many countries. Right now on the news, you're hearing probably a lot about Syria.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of refugees are coming from Syria right now because there's a big war. But there's also refugees coming from a lot of other countries. So Afghanistan, Eritrea, Burundi, in different countries like that. Yeah.
And how do they know where to go or not to go?
I think that is, it's challenging for people. Sometimes they do know where to go, and sometimes they don't know where to go. So now with cell phones, it's a lot easier for people to stay in touch, and with YouTube videos, people are able to share information a lot faster, and so people can give each other suggestions on where to go, where is it safe to go now, and so they can use that to help them decide where to go.
Okay, good. And is it hard for refugees' kids or more hard for refugee grown-ups?
I think it is hard for everybody, unfortunately. Nobody wants to leave their home, their school. They don't want to leave their friends. But I think it's really hard for kids. But it's good if, it's not an easy process for them. But if they have their parents there to help explain what's happening, it can make it a little bit easier. But I don't think it's easy for anybody who's been forced to leave their home.
And where do they live when they come to a country?
To a country. So sometimes they might have family in that country, so they could stay with family or friends, and that makes it a little bit easier. But sometimes, they might be sponsored by maybe the government or a family member or a church, like the church that we're in right now. Sometimes churches sponsor families, and they're the ones that help them get settled in, find a place to live, find a school for their kids. And that makes it a lot easier for them.
Oh, yeah. And if could also they go, how do they get there?
How do they get there? Well, it depends. So here, because we are on a different continent than many others, they would have to come by plane. But if we're talking about Syria, for example, maybe they're able to drive across into Lebanon so they can get from one country to the next. And sometimes people go by foot. Sometimes people have to take a boat. It really depends on where they're coming from and where they're trying to get to safety.
And can it also be just one town who's in danger and the other parts is not in danger?
Yeah, so that is actually what we call an internally displaced person. So if they stay in their country, and they make their way to another city or another town or another province, that would be someone who's internally displaced.
And do sometimes we give them a home or they just find their home? their stuffs.
So in some places we have what we call refugee camps, and that's where there'll be a lot of refugees all living together, and that is often supported by the UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Commission of Refugees. But often they have to find their own home, unfortunately. If they don't have family or friends to help them, it's up to them to try to find the house, and that can be really difficult.
And can they also live in the street?
Sometimes, yeah, if they have nowhere else to go. Unfortunately, some people are in the streets. So that's good. That's why it's so important for us to talk to people and see if there's any way that we can help them, because sometimes people just need an extra little bit of help.
How can I help?
Excellent question. So I think there's different ways that we can all help. I think what you're doing right now, just out of curiosity, asking about refugees, that is a really good way to help, talking about refugees, so that people understand a little bit more some of the challenges that they're facing. That's really good. Other ways, you can help locally by maybe doing little fundraisers, or, I know someone who, instead of money for their birthday, they asked to get books to give to refugees or people who've newly arrived here in Canada. So now we're able to share those books with people. So there's little ways that we can help.
Okay. If I have book and toys, where do I give them to?
Yeah, so there's different organizations around Montreal. There's the YMCA. I know they collect some things sometimes. Here, sometimes at Action Réfugiés Montréal, we're able to take little things, or shelters. Sometimes they're able to take books and toys. Depends.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting meeting you.
You as well. Thank you.
That was so interesting. See you next week.